let me demonstrate what intellectual consistency looks like. So I know that Elon Musk is a bullshitter, right? He says all kinds of garbage. He manipulates stocks, he manipulates investors, making promises. Well, I'm gonna do this and that and whatever. By the way, where's the Roadster car, right? Where's the Roadster that people put deposits on? That's what he does, right? Now, I recognize this, and so does Kyle Kalinske. However, as I've stated before, pretty much you can get Kyle to believe just about anything that makes Trump look bad or makes Republicans look bad. Anything in left-wing Twitter that supports that kind of stuff, he's basically like the left-wing Alex Jones at this point, because that's the same thing Alex Jones would do. Any kind of story about, Democrats are eating cats or whatever, Alex Jones, you can guarantee he's going to be no skepticism. The Democrats are eating cats. That's exactly what Kyle Kalinske does. Now, myself in contrast, recognizing that Elon Musk is a bullshitter, whenever he says stuff, whether it's something I would want to believe is true or would go along with what I would expect to believe is true, that doesn't change the fact that I believe he's a bullshitter, right? So he's talking to some girl that he's sleeping with, and he says he's got some matrix and I've got satellites and whatever, and whatever. Okay, so a bullshitter is talking to some girl he's sleeping with about some, I've got whatever. Why would I change my stance? Like, he's a bullshitter, right? So my first response is the same way it would be if he said anything else. I don't trust anything that Elon Musk says, right? I can't be, skeptical about him unless he says something that sounds like, ooh. So wait a minute, am I actually doing the same thing I'm accusing Kyle Kalinske of? Am I simply gonna dismiss whatever he says because I have a bias against Elon Musk? So anything he says, I'm just gonna dismiss it? No, I'm gonna treat it like I treat anything else, right? The way this works is if Elon Musk says something, I'm gonna be very suspicious of it. I'm gonna be very skeptical of it, but I'm gonna look into it and think about whether I believe it's true or not. I'm just, skepticism is not automatically dismissal, right? So when I actually take the time to look into it and think about it for myself, rather than just go along with like, Elon Musk, he stole the election with his lasers. I took some time to do some basic analysis, looking at Starlink. Like, these are things, again, and Alex Jones, some crazy story about Democrats. He's not gonna look into it. He's just gonna repeat it and put it out there. This is identical to what Kyle Kalinske does, right? Neither of them are gonna actually spend the time and investigate and think about it. I spent the time and looked into it. I looked into Starlink. I found information about they're actually using some of the Starlink systems for some election adjacent activities. So there is a direct connection between Starlink in some locations and some election infrastructure. However, if I was just looking for clicks, I would go and say, there it is, he's plugged into. But the reality is, it's isolated locations. It's not like he had enough locations for it to really matter in terms of he's connected and he's going to rig the election, right? But again, if you just focus on clicks and views, you're not going to go into that level of nuance. You're just going to say he rigged it, right? More realistically, what he was doing is a combination of what he always does. It's not a complete lie, but it's not really what it appears to be. So he makes it sound grandiose, like, I have this mega whatever. But then the reality is, he's probably talking about some kind of next level sort of information loop, intelligence loop. Basically, it's all about the data, right? He's got the X platform. So in theory, you can see everything on there, right? So whether you're left wing, right wing, whoever you are, your private messages would be exposed to him, right? What you're commenting on, the sentiment of your comments, and then you got Grok to do an analysis. So he's got that data. Now, what he can get from Starlink is where they're using it, adjacent to election infrastructure. There's certain data that he can use to, let me just oversimplify. Imagine if in the locations where the election was happening and they were using Starlink, he can't see what people are voting for, but he can see in real time voter turnout, for example. Something in that data allows him to see that kind of information. So what you do is you have this loop, right? He's consuming real-time data on X, right? And he's consuming data on location at these voting locations. You saw it's not sexy when you talk about the nuance, right? It's easy to just say, they rigged the election, right? Anyway, so what they can do is they run a bunch of ads, and then they can look at what people are saying on Twitter. They can look at private messages. They can look at all that data. And they're also looking at data on location at some voting locations. So they could see with this, when you show these ads, voter turnout is going up. When you show these ads, voter turnout is going down. Why is that? Okay. 4 elements in both of these ads. Let's start, mixing and matching so we can, highlight what components of the ad is making them perform better. And let's do more of that. It's the trans stuff. When we had everything the same, but we took out the trans stuff, voter turnout went down. We put back in the trans stuff, voter turnout went up. Now, some would oversimplify and say that sounds like just normal data that you get from ads. But again, he would have much higher level data than anyone else would have, right? No one else has, like, in this position who's like campaigning or whatever, has their entire basically network, or has basically owns some of the infrastructure being used at some of these election locations. So yes, he would have the normal data that people have from just running ads, but he has an entire social media platform. So that's a whole nother level of data. So bottom line is, and to totally simplify it, he would have massively more data than anyone else would, regardless of affiliation or whatever, massively more data. And obviously that's going to give him a supreme advantage, but it's not like rigging. I'm sure there's some ethical concerns about what he was doing. It was certainly an unfair advantage. It was certainly, this was happening, tipping the scale towards Donald Trump. And maybe without this sort of meddling, but not really meddling, maybe Kamala would have won. I mean, that could be the case, but it's not the same thing as like he hacked the systems and he flipped votes or any of that kind of stuff. And more than, I don't know, right? I don't know what actually happened, but what I can tell you is I actually took the time to think about this and think about what Elon Musk might have been saying. I consider he's a bullshitter, but still, just because a bullshitter doesn't mean I dismiss it. I took the time to look into Starlink and what it's capable of doing, trying to decipher what he meant by bragging about the satellites. I took the time to investigate and find out about this infrastructure where he had stuff at some of these election sites, right? And all of that to me points to sort of the same type of stuff you see being done by everyone else with advertising, but on steroids to a degree that we've never seen. And there's a reason why they pay millions of dollars for just the normal ads, right? They pay millions of dollars for those normal ads and for the click-through data. There's a reason why they spend that kind of money. So if he's got a on steroids version of that, right, it would theoretically have a major impact. But that is just not as sexy as, he rigged the elections! But that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to look for clicks and try to get your attention and follow trends. I'm here to inform you about what's really happening, get people to unplug from propaganda, whether it's left-wing, right-wing, mainstream media, especially independent media propaganda. That's my function, which is not something a lot of people want, which is why this channel will always be small, but so be it, right? If my channel never grows, that doesn't affect my life at all. Now, for just about everybody else on this platform, that's not the case, because this is how they pay their bills. So they need you to watch, they need you to click, right? And if they can't keep you clicking, they can't pay their bills, so they're incentivized to lie and manipulate and do what they do. Anyway, tell me your thoughts below.